Hey, what's going on, Summoners? My name is Crumbs, and today we're going to be taking a look at the secret to never throwing a game in League. The game is full of a constant ebb and flow when it comes to gold and experience advantages, especially now with objective bounties. However, we've seen that tons of players get huge leads just to lose the game anyways because of a series of throws. Not only does this feel awful, but it's also extremely preventable. In this video, we're gonna cover a ton of different ways for you to avoid throwing. This will improve your overall game knowledge while also solidifying your fundamentals. Without further ado, let's get right into it. The thing about throwing games is that it happens all the time. While this can be avoided through careful planning and execution, it's not something that is always easy to pick up. Throwing a game can be as simple as dying because you overstayed to take a turret. While that on its own doesn't seem like a huge deal, this often snowballs to become a huge problem. With you dead, the enemy can now get vision control of Baron or Dragon. That vision control can now put your allies in a tough spot depending on the game state, because now they'll be forced to give the objective or fight a 4v5. If your team fights a 4v5, it's likely that they'll lose, which will then give up a bit of your lead. Not only did your one death just swing the game with quite a bit of gold, but it also took a tax on your team's mental stability. That's a big deal. From here, your team is now forced to play far cleaner than before, and you'll need to hope no one is tilted off that play. Throwing is an effect that can snowball in games, which is why it's so important to minimize your chances of throwing. Trust us, we have seen thousands of games thrown away simply because of something as small as an overstay or wanting a few extra minions. Hopefully after this guide, you won't be doing it as often, or who knows, maybe you won't do it at all. When it comes to throwing, be sure to be forgiving. I know it sucks to lose off of a throw, but it's something that everyone does and has done. If you need some help learning how to break your bad habits and avoid throwing some easy wins, then be sure to check us out at ProGuides.com. With our in-depth guides, we can help you form great solo queue habits and avoid breaking your own mental. If courses and lessons aren't your thing, don't worry. We have challenger level coaches that are available 24/7 to help you out. So what are you waiting for? Go check us out and join the ProGuides family. Nonetheless, let's get back into the video and dive right into why throwing has become such a big issue. Throwing was already a problem that plagued the League community. It could be seen in high elo and even pro play. In the past, however, throwing a lead was a bit harder as there weren't many things that allowed for comebacks. In the past few months, however, Riot has continuously added more and more ways for teams to play from behind and catch back up. A key example of these new mechanics is the relatively new objective bounty system. While it has received a couple of nerfs, the fact that it exists is a huge turning point in how the game is played. In the past, you could easily trade objectives for game-changing plays elsewhere on the map when you had a lead. Now, it's a bit more difficult because if you don't push your lead hard enough, the enemy team can catch back up with these objective bounties. Think of it this way, you can send your team to break the top turret so you can further control the topside jungle. However, if the enemy trades bot turret for it, they get more gold than you for a similar play. The bounty system forces players to think twice about every play they make to avoid losing their lead. 3 seasons ago, your team could have a 5k gold lead and have a bad Baron fight. The enemy team would end up getting some gold for killing your team and trim down your gold lead from 5k to 2.5. Nowadays, that one Baron fight can flip the game on its head. Your team can now go from that 5k gold lead to actually being down 1k. This is because the enemy will get shutdowns from champions to the Baron, and if they're quick enough, they'll also get bonus gold from the turret bounty. Overall, throwing games has become easier than ever with all of these new systems, which is why it can be hard for new players to end games after gaining massive leads. Before we get into how to avoid throwing a lead, we have to understand what a lead actually does and means. On the surface, you can define a lead as simply being ahead. However, what counts as being ahead? Is it having more gold than the enemy, having more objectives? What if your entire team is 2 levels ahead of the enemy but down in gold? Does that mean that your team is ahead, behind, or neither? Well, when it comes to having a lead, it can actually be a combination of a lot of things. The best way to know if you have a lead is by gauging if you and your team are able to successfully make plays around the map without being at a significant disadvantage. For example, if the enemy has 5k more gold than you, but 3 of it is in the support, then the enemy lead isn't as big as it seems. If you dive into it further, you may even see that your carries are farther ahead in gold and experience due to this. With this in mind, you and your team can still take fights and win without having to play with perfect macro or mechanical prowess. The biggest thing when determining if and when you have a lead is to just continuously ask questions. It's hard at first to be able to pinpoint when you and your allies can take winning fights without falling behind, but the more aware you become of your gameplay and the current game state, the easier it'll become. Don't succumb to autopiloting every game in hopes of climbing. Ask yourself about the game state, about if your team is strong, why are they strong, how do you like to fight, what's favorable terrain, etc. You are consistent in all of your games, so be sure to grow your awareness of the game state as you continue to climb. Now before we move on to our best ways to avoid throwing, let's not forget about our favorite ProGuides tradition. Today, we want to ask you all, what do y'all think of the recent Scion nerfs? Personally, I think it's a healthy change overall to the game, but it's definitely weird because it's unwarranted. Sure, inting Scion is a nightmare to play against, but we're not sure that enough people were having success with it for it to actually be nerfed that hard. Plus, he has a negative win rate overall. Regardless of what your answer may be, let us know in the comments section down below. Nonetheless, let's get back into the video and dive into our key strategies. One of the best ways for you to avoid throwing games is to understand the strengths of your team composition. Knowing what your team is good at will help you plan out the best way to push your lead as a team. If your composition is made to carry through powerful 5v5s, then you'll want to set up waves, get vision control, and look for fights together. Just think of it this way. Imagine your team is amazing at team fighting, and all you do is look for small skirmishes. Not only are you giving up your team's best chance at winning team fights, but you're also opening up opportunities for your team to throw the game off of a bad fight. Let's say your team is great at split pushing. Then be sure to use your lead to get your split pusher ahead and understand how to play the map with them. With enough of a lead, your split pusher can't be matched unless the enemy sends 2 to 3 people to deal with them. Use that number advantage to take objectives, force fights, or break multiple turrets on the other side of the map. Just be sure that you're communicating with your team what needs to be done and how to avoid fighting. Maybe your team excels at small skirmishes or catching the enemy out. Then use your lead to group as a team, establish vision control, and set up waves. Since you'll have the advantage, your team can look to force fights off things like a blitzcrank hook or an ash arrow. Who knows, maybe your team can even fake taking Baron so that the enemy walks into you and your death bush. There are a ton of different ways to play the game, and they all depend on your team composition. Be sure to give yourself a minute to figure out what your team is good at so that you can play to that advantage. Failing to play to your team's strengths is one of the most common ways to throw in solo queue because of how uncoordinated the game can feel. Take command and guide your allies to victory, one step at a time. Speaking of understanding team compositions, it's important for you to know where you fall within your team. This is best done by looking at your own champion's strengths and weaknesses. If you're the Fiora that's going to split push all game, then be sure to let your allies know when they can push and what objectives you are both playing for. Tell them that if the enemy sends 3 people for you, that they should take the dragon and bot turret. Maybe you're playing Katarina and need to just wait on the sidelines. Then inform your allies that you can't be the primary engage, but that you can wipe the fight if they do. Every champion has different strengths to play off of, which leads to our next point. Just how each champ is powerful in one area of play, they also have different ways of carrying games. How you carry a game is extremely important because it's what allows you to truly use your lead. What's the point of playing a powerful champion like Akshan if all you're using your lead for is to teamfight front to back? We're not going to touch on every single carry style, but let's cover a few so you know what to look out for. Once you can identify how your team and your champs carry games, it'll be easier to push your lead without throwing it all away because of a misplay. Some champs are powerful roamers and use their high mobility and base damage to impact the map. These include champions like Akshan, Pyke, and Nunu. With these kind of carries, you're not looking to scale into 45-minute matches by yourself. Instead, you're looking to get your allies ahead by ganking their lanes and setting up kills. With these kills, you can slowly develop a lead and help your team take objectives. It can be a bit hard to play these style of champions because once you throw your lead, it can be difficult to come back due to your lack of scaling. However, they're some of the best when it comes to forcefully gaining an early lead and getting a snowball started. Next, we have champs like Fiora, Tryndamere, Ryze, Hecarim, LeBlanc, etc. that like to split push or hover side lanes. These champs are looking to gain a lead off of solo kills and love to shove waves and look for fights or picks. Someone like Tryndamere plays for a 2 to 3 item spike so that he can shove waves and get his allies ahead through sheer map pressure. As a split pusher, it's up to you to avoid throwing your lead with overstays, because once you die, your team is at a significant man disadvantage since it's likely you have most of the team gold. As for someone like LeBlanc or Hecarim, they love to sit in the fog of war after clearing a wave and want to hover allies. Once an enemy attempts to go for them, they're caught out and forced into a 2v1. It's up to you to watch the map and make sure that you're not being tricked into a 2v4 due to lack of awareness. Plus, it can be risky as a jungler to sit in the sidelines on the other side of the map with something like Baron being up. Finally, we have champions like Jinx, Kayle, or Veigar who love to teamfight and scale. These champs are extremely easy to throw on, but they're also some of the most forgiving. With a slight lead, these picks can make you feel unstoppable, and it often leads you to forcing bad fights and throwing away your lead because of ego. If you can stop this from happening and instead use your lead to protect your mid to late game, then you will scale and easily 1v9 games. At the same time, these hyper carry champs are very forgiving when it comes to throwing leads because they're extremely volatile. Sure, you may give away 1k gold with your shutdown and maybe a few objectives, but all it takes is one awkward fight for you to get a few kills and easily get your lead back. It can be tricky playing these champions, but at the end of the day, they can be some of the best at gaining a lead and keeping it. Just be sure that you understand that you will outscale, so use your lead to protect your late game and play off of your power spikes. Last but not least, we've got the idea of questioning your actions. We often bring this up when we talk about improving your play because it forces you out of autopilot. Well, it's no different than when you're attempting to keep your lead and avoid throwing it away. One of the best things to ask yourself during the game is, what are we fighting for? You can take this one step further by planning ahead. The next dragon puts the enemy on soul point, but it's also a cloud soul. Should your team fight it? Is it worth risking your lead for a measly cloud soul? What can you get instead? How much time do you have to make your decision? Being able to plan ahead and avoid pointless fights is easily one of the best and most simple ways to avoid throwing games. This can keep you from taking random fights and avoiding countless deaths. Remember the example we made at the beginning of the video? That one small death can be game-changing and can snowball into a massive throw? Had the one person in our example thought ahead, they could have avoided it entirely. What does the extra minion wave get you? Is staying for the turret and extra wave worth the risk of you dying and losing objectives and vision control? These are the kinds of questions that you need to ask yourself during your game so that you can keep yourself in control of the situation at all times. Don't fall victim to petty throws by overstaying, taking pointless fights, or simply walking in circles without purpose. Create a plan with your team and think of the best way to execute it. Sure, you may have an ally or two that won't listen, but in the long run, you'll be the one who will climb with this kind of decision making. Overall, it can be difficult to stop and question your actions, but it's a basic way to start your journey of never throwing again. Just give yourself some room to grow and be patient, even with your allies. Yes, I know it sucks that your top laner just lost you the game because they threw, but who knows, maybe they're also on their journey to avoid throwing games. And that sums up our video for today. Don't forget to join our ProGuides family at ProGuides.com. We offer exclusive giveaways and classes that you won't catch anywhere else, so stay tuned and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, good luck on the Rift, and may the LP gods smile down upon you.